This one. This one.
All right.
So I can get you out.
Oh my God.
Let Jesus abide.
Oh my God. Thank you, Lord.
17 episodes later.
So, are we not in our light?
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's your girl, the Brooke Ashley, and today we are here to discuss The Real Housewives of Atlanta, Season 16, Reunion Part 1. And before we get into it, let me start off by saying that I was not blown away by this first part at all. And if I'm being honest, I'm not that surprised that this first part wasn't that great, because we're missing two key players. We're missing Britt Edie and we're missing Kenya. So I think with them being gone, there's only so much that we can really get from all three parts. But hopefully parts 2 and 3 pick up a bit, because this first part left a lot to be desired. But I think the highlight for me was watching Drew read Porsha get her licks in, and Porsha apologizing to Drew, and that was long overdue if you ask me, because Porsha had no right, in my opinion, to treat Drew so poorly for the majority of the season. But without further ado, let's get right on into it, because you guys already know that we don't have a minute to spare. So we open up the first part just like we do with every other reunion. They arrive to the studios, they're in hair and makeup, getting glammed up. Now I did think it was funny because Porsha was in her dressing room sleeping. I said, yeah girl, get that nap in now, because for the next 12 or 13 hours, you're going to be on the hot seat. So yes girl, rest up. So we see Kelly and Shamia in their dressing rooms getting ready. We see Angela getting ready. And now we cut over to Phaedra, and we see Phaedra walk over to Britt Edie's dressing room, and Britt is not there. So we see Phaedra walk into Porsha's room. She's like, girl, wake up, get up. Britt's not here. Have you heard from her? Porsha tries calling Britt, no answer. Now I think it was already 8:30, 9 a.m., so it's safe to assume that Britt is going to be a no-show. And once again, Britt, you took the coward's way out, because not showing up is unacceptable. Now, Drew, love you down, but why are you showing up at 10:15 a.m.? I said, girl, we need to work on the time management because it's getting out of hand. And mind you, we cut over to Andy. He's already on set waiting for all of them. And he says, it's already 11:30. Like, we are 2.5 hours behind. I said, my God, 2.5 hours late. And you guys got there at 6:30 a.m. Like, what are we doing? So Kelly, Angela, and Shamia are the first ones to arrive on set. And I have to say, Shamia, this was your best look to date. I thought that Shamia looked beautiful. The bob, the dress, the color, chef's kiss, girl, you did that. Now, Shamia, I need you to keep this up and give us some real style for next season. Because come season 17, I don't want to see these tacky, gaudy fashions with all the logos displayed. Give us some actual style, please. So now Porsha comes out, and full stop, Porsha looked amazing. The dress, the makeup, the hair, flawless. She looked phenomenal. But she always kills her reunion look, so it's not a surprise. Now, Shamia making a face when Porsha walked out. Did I think that that was jealousy? No, I just think that it was anger on Shamia's part because they're not getting along. They're not friends right now. Because Shamia and Porsha are both beautiful women, so I don't think that there is jealousy in that regard. But I just feel like Shamia has been fed up with her friend. She's been angry at Porsha, and that's why she made that face. Let me know what you guys thought about that down below. But hands down, my top 3 at this reunion, looks-wise, Porsha, Shamia, and Angela. They killed it. Everybody else tried. Kelly's dress swallowed her up. I didn't like Drew's dress. Phaedra, I don't know what this ensemble was, but no ma'am. I don't know what you thought you were doing, but it was not giving what the other girls said it was supposed to have gave, in the words of Rolling Ray. Production and Andy played in Drew's face, because why Drew was at the end made no sense to me. Miss Drew Sidora was everybody's storyline and punching bag, so her being at the end didn't sit right with me, but okay. So we start the reunion off with Andy going around the room saying hello to each housewife. He starts off with Porsha, and we find out that Porsha got her boobs redone. Miss Coco and Chanel are in their rightful place. Then he goes over to Phaedra and he's like, hey Phaedra, how are you feeling? Do you have PTSD from your last reunion? So Phaedra's like, well, you know, reunions are always so crazy. You never know what to expect. Now I know that Phaedra probably never forgets about what happened during that season 9 reunion, but I would be surprised to hear that Phaedra has PTSD from being back on a reunion stage when she was at the Married to Medicine reunion the season before last. So now Andy moves on from all the pleasantries and he brings up how Britt Edie decided not to come today. She's a no-show. So everybody's like, oh wow. Phaedra says that she's shocked. And now Andy wants to get Kelly's reaction, and Kelly says that it's unfortunate because Britt caused mass destruction in this group, and for her not to show up, it just shows that she's always the villain and the victim at the same time. And I agree with that. I think that it is shameful that for somebody who's at the center of a lot of the drama in this group, for you not to show up to the reunion, that's a huge F you to the viewers and your castmates and the network, because you sat up here wanting to be a housewife all this time, you get on the show, you cause all this chaos, and then you want to duck and dodge the reunion because you can't own up to what you've done and said. And it's also making me believe that the rumors surrounding you and your husband and what you guys really do for a living, that they're true. There's a lot out there saying that you guys are both frauds and that you guys don't have money. It's all smoke and mirrors. And you knew that you would have to answer for all that at this reunion. So you said, shout out to everybody, I had fun, because you don't want to answer to any of it. Once again, I think that Bravo needs to do a better job with the vetting process, because too many con artists and grifters are joining these shows. So now Phaedra jumps in to give her 2 cents, and she says that at the end of the day, this is a sisterhood, whether they like it or not. So then she goes on to say that she feels bad that Britt didn't feel comfortable enough to call her up about this. And I said, but Phaedra, whether or not Britt called you, Britt was most likely going to skip out on this reunion because she did not want to answer to what she's done and said. And she also was not trying to own up to what's been said about her and her husband in the blogs, the whole mess about not paying the event planner for that horrible event. She wasn't trying to own up to it. It just really sucks when somebody decides to quit and not show up to the reunion, because it makes you not even want to discuss the things that happened. The person isn't even there, so why even talk about it? So now we do find out that Porsha did speak to her last night, and she says that they only talked about the husbands being there, not about her skipping out. So now Shamia jumps in and says that Britt said a lot of things that weren't true, and she was looking forward to confronting her about it and addressing it all today. So now Andy wants to know what are Drew's thoughts about Britt Edie being a no-show, and Drew says, well, it's funny that you asked, because a few weeks ago she texted me saying that she was suing me. They're all like, girl, what? Now, Britt, I need you to stop with all these lawsuits. You're telling me that you can't pay to feed the people at your parties, but you have all this money to pay lawyers for all these frivolous lawsuits? It makes no sense. And can somebody give me the update on this lawsuit that she filed against Bravo? Because again, girl, I'm just like, Britt, what are we doing? Once again, I'm going to need NBC, Universal, and Bravo to do a better job with the vetting process on who joins these shows. And the reason behind Britt trying to sue Drew made no sense, because she's mad about some blog that was talking about what was on the poster board that Kenya had. What does it have to do with Drew? So now we move on to Andy asking about the inspiration behind Phaedra's headpiece. Phaedra says that Jab Jab inspired her, and whether that's true or not, either way, that headpiece was a no for me, and I'm gonna just leave that there. And the fact that you have the nerve to talk about Drew's fashions, I mean, I didn't love Drew's dress either for this reunion, but I liked it a lot better than I liked what you were wearing, just saying. So now Andy commends Shamia, Kelly, and Angela for having a great first season as newbies. And I have to say, Kelly and Shamia started off strong, then fizzled out during the middle. And Angela was a slow burn. I feel like she really came into her own later on. I enjoyed her. But in all honesty, I feel like Angela had the best season out of the three of them. So now Andy goes on to ask the women if they want to set an intention for today, and now Porsha jumps in to set her intention for the day and how she wants to step up to the plate with each lady about their issues with the truth. So then she goes on to add that she wants to find a way to move forward or to either close the door. And it wasn't lost on me that both Shamia and Drew looked annoyed when Porsha said that. Now we were about 8 or 9 minutes in and we see they bring Cynthia out, and I said, damn, Cynthia came out after the first commercial break. When do we see that? Because anytime we have a friend of come out at the reunion, they usually come out at the end of part 1, beginning of part 2, and they're gone by the middle of part 2. The fact that they brought Cynthia out so early, you could have just had her come out with everybody else, if I'm being honest. But Andy says that it was great seeing Cynthia this season, and then he wants to know how does she feel about being a friend of. So Cynthia says that she had a great time, and I said, girl, we know you had a great time. You got a big check to do half of the work. You had 0 drama, you got 2 free trips, and with all the screen time that you got and those confessionals, girl, it was almost like you were full-time again. Only thing missing was a tagline, but yeah, you pretty much had full-time status. And don't get me wrong, I like Cynthia, but if I'm being honest, Cynthia as a friend of didn't bring a whole lot. I was hoping for more, and the more never came. So now it's time for Porsha's segment. They play the montage, and we see that they ended with Londy's passing. Andy gives his condolences, and then he says, well, in happier times, it was nice to see you finally film in your house. So Porsha says, oh yeah, that house meant a few things to me. Before me and Simon got married, we both agreed to get a prenup. But we were so in love that at one point we thought about throwing out the paperwork and not doing one. Now Phaedra's ad-libs on the side had me screaming. She was like, and I said, we know that Phaedra is still scarred from marrying that bum and having to pay him a lot of money when he was on his way out. Once again, ladies, stop marrying down. Phaedra is another cautionary tale of what happens when you marry down. And that's why she's not pressed to get remarried unless the man has more money, because she got burned by Apollo. So Andy goes on to ask the question that we all want to know. Whose house is it? So Porsha says that Simon bought the home prior to them getting married, but the prenup has stipulations saying that it's a marital home, so it's her home. I said, one thing about Miss Porsha, Porsha will give you that dumb, blonde, ditzy act all day, but Miss Mamas is smart. She's a lot smarter and cunning than she lets on. She said, this time around, I'm leaving here with something.
I'm leaving here with something. You know what I mean? I'm from around the way. I'm leaving with something.
I'm leaving with this house, and she did just that. Then Porsha says that whether she keeps it or sells it, she still wants to be able to maintain it. So now Andy's like, okay, so where are you guys at in your divorce process? And Porsha says it's almost like the phantom divorce, kind of like her. So when she said like her, Drew and Kelly are both like, wait, is she referring to me or you, Kelly? And even Kelly's confused. Now, if I had to assume, I would assume that she was referring to Kelly because Kelly's divorce went on for 3 years. So when I tell you Andy is good and messy because he's like, look, where's Simon? So Porsha says, well, I'd rather not speak on Simon due to legal reasons. So Andy's like, well, that's cool and all, but I read that he was detained by ICE. And Porsha says, yes, that's true. And now Andy turns to Phaedra and he's like, why is Simon being detained? So now Phaedra says that it's an immigration issue because Simon doesn't have citizenship here. Again, you can always tell when Andy's trying to be nosy because he was like, is it like jail or something? And Phaedra says, yeah, pretty much. So now Andy brings up all the Twitter jokes about how Porsha was the one who called ICE on Simon. And she says, yeah, they think it's funny, but it does not benefit me whatsoever to have him detained. Now, Porsha, you already know that a lot of the viewers have an issue with how you and Simon got together in the first place. So you cannot be surprised at the jokes that were flying around about you being behind that. I thought it was interesting when Andy went on to ask Shamia if her husband and Simon were friends. And Shamia was like, well, yeah, they were cool. Like, they were friendly. We took couples trips together. And I said, Shamia, don't downplay it now. On social media, we saw you guys hanging out all the time. Y'all were at jewelry stores together. I mean, everybody looked like great buddy old pals to me. I understand that Simon's caught up in all this mess, so now you guys want to back away slowly from him. But let's not sit up here and act like your husband and Simon weren't two peas in a pod at one point. I also thought it was interesting how Shamia revealed that she did have a conversation with Porsha about the finances, about the rumors about Simon being a scammer. And now Porsha goes on to say, yeah, I know. I remember how you and your husband talked to me about the rumors about Simon and how his money might not be what it seems, but it took us 9 months to do our prenup, so due diligence was done. I said, no, it wasn't, Porsha. If you did your due diligence, you would have found out that he was a fraud. I think you were blinded by the 40,000 square foot mansion that he had with Fallon, the Rolls Royces, the Bentleys, and you said, say less. And you made sure that with that prenup, you would walk away with a nice lump sum and a house. But do I believe that you did your due diligence about his finances and how he gets his money? Is it shady or not? I don't believe that you did any research about it. I don't. And when I tell y'all, the viewers' questions for this first part ate down. Because Andy reads one asking Kelly, why did she ask Porsha about why did Porsha steal that lady's husband? Was that out of concern or messiness? Now, Kelly, let me just sit up here and whack you. When you said, oh, it was out of concern, I said, now, girl, stop. We don't have to lie. It's okay to just admit that I was being messy. So, of course, Porsha and Kelly get into it. And now Porsha's like, well, Kelly, did you get your answer? And Kelly says, well, the answer that you gave me was that you fell in love with him. Am I buying it? No. So Porsha goes on to say that her and Kelly had a real woman-to-woman conversation. They both realized that they were going through the same thing with Kelly's ex-husband bashing her online. So Kelly's not trying to hear it. She says, look, Porsha, you and I did not go through the same thing. And I was married for 11 years. You were married for 11 months. So let's not compare apples to peaches. Now, it was so obvious that Kelly wrote that one down. You could tell that she waited all day to say that apples to peaches line. I mean, it kind of ate. I'll give Kelly her 5s for that. But I said, okay, girl. But I said, besides that, Kelly is correct because Kelly had it worse in her divorce. Her divorce dragged on for 3 years. So Kelly says, once again, Porsha, I'm not denying that we had that conversation. All I'm saying is you cannot compare my divorce to your divorce. So here goes Porsha saying that they're both women who went through divorces and she was fighting for her life. So Kelly says, girl, I was fighting literally and financially. Again, knowing what we know about what happened in Kelly's marriage, the hell that she went through, the hell that her daughters went through, cops being called, her having to hide out in her closet at certain times, her ex-husband being a complete monster, him being in and out of jail. I don't think that Porsha can compare what she went through to what Kelly went through. And also, Porsha, I have to call you out about something because for you to say we're both women going through divorces, well, where was that compassion and sympathy and empathy for Drew? So now we move on to Andy addressing Porsha's comment about effing Charles. And Porsha says, well, first off, I do want to apologize. But at Cynthia's event, when me and Angela sat down to talk and clear the air, Angela apologized to me because she had brought up Simon. She had made a comment saying that I need to be accountable for stealing Simon away from his wife. So now Angela jumps in and she says, first of all, let me tell you what I actually said. I said that you were the first person to bring up Charles. And then in Nashville, I asked you, why'd you take that lady's husband? And then Shamia jumped in and said that she introduced you to. So now Shamia jumps in saying, no, I never said that. They've both said themselves that they were in each other's DMs. So now Phaedra's like, girl, play the tapes back. And we play the tapes back. And in Shamia's defense, Shamia never said that she introduced her and Simon. She just said that she was there when they met. Now, I was confused as to why Porsha was so silent when Andy asked her, wait, did Shamia introduce you, or were you in the DMs? Like, what's the deal with how you and Simon met? And she's just sitting there. I just said, Porsha, we're not playing these dumb games. You're at the reunion. Speak up. There's just no way that you thought that you would come back onto this show and not have to address what happened between you and Simon. Just own up to what you did and we can move on. So like I said a few minutes ago, you can always tell when Andy wants to get to the bottom of the mess, because he's like, wait, so did you and Shamia concoct a story saying that she introduced you to, so that way you didn't have to admit that you crept into his DMs? So of course Porsha's super defensive and she says, no, absolutely not. Somebody introduced us. All parties have moved on. I got him, then I gave him back. Porsha, if you would just give us a straight answer about what happened, how it all went down, and just own up to what you did was not right, then we can all move on and just say, you know what? Okay, it is what it is. It happened, whatever. We know that if this were anybody else, Porsha would be screaming about how they're not telling their full story, they're not being honest, but yet it's okay for her not to say anything and gloss over it. So now we get another viewer question addressing Porsha and Dennis on their YouTube channel, how they have great chemistry, and is there any chance of them giving Pilar a sibling or getting back together? So you have Porsha giving this BS answer, and she's like, oh my gosh, Dennis is such a jewel, and that's why I was so protective of him, because I needed my co-parent to help me cope through this divorce. So now she says, me and Dennis have a good old time, Key King. And now Kelly throws some shade saying, yeah, all in that man's house. And Porsha was pissed. She was like, whose house is my house? Did you have your house? So Kelly says, oh no, girl, I moved out immediately. So now you have Porsha saying, oh yeah, next time, get a better prenup. I said, ooh. I said, Kelly really struck a nerve by saying you're all up in that man's house with Dennis. So now Andy reads another viewer question asking Drew if she still stands by her comments that she made recently on a podcast saying that Porsha's return was a flop and a try-hard. And shout out to No Chaser TV, because we see the clip of when Drew was on his podcast, and Drew was pretty much saying that Porsha's whole return was a flop and she didn't give anything. So Drew was like, yeah, I stand 10 toes down in what I said, because we could have talked about Porsha's life, but instead she chose to attack me all season, and she did. And that's why I've been disappointed in Porsha's grand return, because I expected so much more. I wanted to see the fun Porsha, because I really do enjoy when Porsha's having a good time. Seeing Porsha as the mean girl, it's not fun. But for her to give us the same energy that she was giving on her spinoff, no ma'am. So now you have Porsha throwing shade, and she says you need to be focused on who's flipping and flopping in that basement with Ralph instead of worrying about me. And I said, one, Drew and Ralph are in the middle of a divorce. Two, why would Drew care about who was in the basement with Ralph when they are not together? Does that make sense, Porsha? But anyhow, you can't deny that Drew cleared in this moment when she said, Simon says that you had no storyline. I said, whack her again.
I'm just scoot on over and let you whack him. Get him again. Get him for me.
I said, you ate that, Drew. I said, you did that. I'm not going to hold you, though. I did zone out when Drew and Porsha went back and forth. You have Porsha saying that she was so on edge because Dennis is her family and that is her storyline. And the fact that Drew put herself in the middle of all that. One, how did Drew put herself in the middle of it when they are working together? It is a business relationship. That's it. That's all. That's not putting yourself in the middle of anything, because it's not a romantic relationship. And I'm sorry, Porsha, but you made yourself look even worse when Andy went on to ask you, did you honestly think that Drew was giving booty for beats? And you have Porsha saying, well, you know, Dennis had showed me a text. And I said, Porsha, you know good and damn well that Drew and Dennis were not sleeping together. And if Drew had sent Dennis some text about wanting to F him. Don't you think that production would have shown us those text messages? And Drew got you because she said, well, can I see the messages? Because Ralph told me what was in those messages, so let me see. So now you have Porsha saying, oh, I don't have the messages anymore. I said, okay, Porsha. And Cynthia, no offense, but we didn't need your 2 cents in this whole thing. When you jumped in to defend Porsha, I said, Cynthia, respectfully, stop. But when I tell you that Drew held her own, because she says, look, me and Porsha did have a conversation about me and Dennis working together. She was supportive of it. Porsha's denying it. You have Shamia jumping in. And Drew had me screaming. She was like, girl, shut up. Go sit on Porsha's lap. I said, but I'm not going to hold you, though. This whole Drew and Dennis Porsha segment went on and on and on. I said, we are going around and around the mulberry bush about a topic that we could have moved on from 5 minutes ago. I wasn't that interested because Porsha's still talking stupid. You have Shamia jumping in, Angela's jumping in. I said, all right, enough already. But you do have Porsha complimenting Drew's album, and she goes on to say that it was really good. And she says, I'll never take away from your talent or your brand, unlike how you did me on The Breakfast Club, talking about my business, Go Naked Hair. Once again, I was on Drew's side. Drew said, girl, don't play victim. You talked about me and dragged me all season long. You can't poke the bear and then get mad at my reaction. And I agree. You can't sit up there and constantly throw shots at somebody. Then when they get you back, now you want to cry victim? That's not how it works. You got your licks in. Drew got her licks right back. It is what it is. You guys are now even. Now, this was the best part of the night for me because Andy reads a viewer question asking Porsha if she feels like she owes Drew an apology because as we saw all season long, that Drew was telling the truth about how her and Dennis strictly have a business relationship. Nothing more. So now Porsha gets up and has her arms out because she wants to give Drew a hug. Now, personally, I would have needed to hear that I'm sorry first before you reach out to hug me. You went on to drag me for the majority of this season, and now you want to give me a hug? Let me hear that I'm sorry first before we get that hug. I'm just saying. Angela had me screaming. She was like, it only took 17 episodes later. So Porsha apologizes and says that she genuinely is sorry for meeting up with Ralph because she knew that she was doing it to be petty. Now, Porsha, we all knew that it was petty. You and Shamia were both petty for that. Because what was the reason? There was no reason at all for you to have a scene with Ralph Pittman. So Drew says that she appreciates the apology because when she first joined the show, she called Porsha. And she was hoping that her and Porsha could resolve these issues. So now you have Porsha saying that she was in fight mode and every time she saw Drew, she was triggered and that's why she did what she did. Now, am I buying that? No. Miss me with all the sob stories about how she was in fight or flight mode due to her divorce when Drew is also going through a hellish divorce as well and she's not out here lying on people or cursing folks out for no reason. Just saying. So now we get to Kelly's segment, and I'm not going to hold you guys. We're going to breeze through a lot of it because when it comes to her and Britt's friendship, I don't have anything more to say. Britt's not here, so what's the point in wasting precious breath talking about it? But I will say I was happy that Kelly cleared up some things when Andy brought up the argument that her and Britt had at Phaedra's event. And so Kelly says that's not true because after I had my twins, I got my tubes tied. So I couldn't have a baby if I tried. But I did feel bad for Kelly when she said that she's raising 4 black, beautiful daughters. And the fact that she now has to have this conversation with them about abortions, she wasn't ready for all that. While I sympathize with Kelly, you did start that argument. And had you not called Britt and her husband a pill popper, Britt would not have hit back with that. Again, when you go low in arguments, always expect for the other person to go lower. We've seen how Britt is in any argument. She always goes low. Porsha jumping in to say that Britt had told her that at the beginning of the season, Britt, Kelly, and Shamia had formed an alliance to take Porsha down. Now, Shamia jumps in and says, well, there was an alliance, but Porsha was also in said alliance as well. So now Porsha says, no, I don't believe in alliances. I feel like alliances always kill these shows. We've seen it on this show, so absolutely not. Now, do alliances kill these shows? Absolutely. We see it on Beverly Hills, Potomac, OC. Alliances absolutely kill the fun and the vibe. But do I believe that there was an original alliance with Porsha in it too? I could see that. So now Andy brings up Kelly's divorce. He says that she's finally free, and Kelly says it feels great. So now Andy wants to know how much were her divorce fees, and she says about 200 grand. So Phaedra makes a joke saying, oh, you got out cheap. And I say, yeah, Phaedra, because aren't you paying Apollo? You're paying him alimony, right? Again, my successful ladies, well, all my ladies, stop dating down. I don't care what you make. He needs to make the same or more. So now Andy brings up Kelly having a bodyguard, and he wants to know if the women think that is strange. So Porsha says, well, no, because there are actually 2 reasons why Kelly has a bodyguard. So Porsha's being smug, and she's like, well, we've all heard about how her ex is after her, but in reality, I heard that it's all false, and she's doing this for the show. So Kelly's like, girl, who told you that? And now Porsha mentions how Kelly's ex-husband reached out to Ralph. And I said, don't all these bums reach out to each other? This man was abusive, Porsha. Why would you believe anything coming out of his mouth? And again, Porsha, that's real nasty for you to try and downplay or minimize what Kelly went through in her marriage. Kelly was so annoyed. She said, girl, first of all, you can't just file a restraining order. There has to be cause. So Phaedra does co-sign what Kelly's saying. And then she goes on to say that if you think that I'd rather pay my bodyguard versus paying my bills, then everybody's effing crazy. Now, Kelly, I have some questions. Because when Andy asked you about what's happening with your second location for Nana's Chicken and Waffles, and he brought up the financial issues, how you owed 100 grand in unpaid rent, I said, Miss Mamas, what's happening? Because we saw BMWs, we saw you buy your daughter 17 designer bags, we saw your dog getting all these treatments, a full glam squad, a bodyguard who follows you around 24/7, but we're seeing in real time that there are money problems. It's giving very much Sheree Whitfield. But Kelly said that the folks got their money and they should be opening real soon. Now, that wasn't that convincing to me. I said, what does real soon mean? Next week, next month, next year? Like, how soon are we talking? So one thing about it, Andy's going to always ask the ladies about their finances because he was like, well, what was the holdup with paying your bills? And Kelly says, well, Andy, I had 200 grand in attorney's fees. Andy does read a viewer question asking Kelly, are these expenses necessary? The designer bags for your daughter, the dog's grooming, the bodyguard, like, shouldn't you focus on something else? And so Kelly makes a joke saying that her dog lives a very glamorous life. And I said, Kelly, I understand that you want your kids and your dog to have the best. But if you don't have the money for it, if you're living on credit and can't even pay it back, is it really worth it? And I understand that being on these shows does put pressure on you to show a lavish, luxurious lifestyle. But if you don't have it, then you don't have it. Because it's embarrassing on your end to act like you have it like that, but in real life, you don't. Again, it's giving very much Sheree Whitfield. Like when Sheree would go out and buy an Aston Martin and it got repossessed. Sheree taking 84 years to finally build Chateau Sheree because she couldn't pay the contractors. That's what it's giving, Miss Mamas. And it wasn't lost on me when Andy low-key shouted out Sheree. He said, well, Kelly, you might want to invest in your chicken and waffles versus everything else because it's giving joggers. And even Kelly had to laugh. She was like, well, you know, it'll be open spring, summer. And one more thing, Kelly, the blogs had exposed you about how you're in credit card debt. I think you owe 28 grand. You're being sued by Capital One or whoever else, but Girl, just a mess. I hope that for season 17, you're honest about your finances and you're not trying to put on airs like you have it like that when you don't. So now we have about 5 minutes left of this reunion, and we close it out with Angela's segment. So they play Angela's montage, and now Andy kicks things off by asking Angela, why was Angela so sure that Phaedra was behind the whole Marcus situation? So Angela goes on to say that Marcus is also from Athens, Georgia, and his Aunt Kimberly knows Phaedra. So Phaedra was like, girl, I don't know an Aunt Kim. So Angela says, it's a pattern with you. And Phaedra says, what pattern? And Angela says, a pattern of lying. Now, Angela, when you pulled out this folder of receipts and you were showing the pictures of Marcus and his Aunt Kimberly knowing Phaedra's oldest brother, what did that prove? Even Phaedra was confused. She was like, okay, and what does that mean? So yeah, they know my oldest brother. They went to high school together. Like, okay, and your point? And I'm sorry, but despite how I feel about Phaedra, I can always be fair. And I'm honestly thinking that maybe Phaedra did not have a part to play in this. I know I thought that Phaedra was behind all this, but now I'm starting to feel like Phaedra might not have done this. Because Angela's receipts are not strong enough for me. And that man, Alex Hines, who's on TikTok, he has that 6-part series about you saying that you're a liar and that Phaedra had no parts in this at all. And you're trying to cover your tracks because that rumor was true about Charles being with another woman.
I get to work one day, it's a normal day, and there's all of a sudden all of this commotion from all the guys in the kitchen about the fact that there's some retired NBA legend that is dining there. I don't follow the NBA, don't really care about the NBA, and with this man being retired, that's clearly before my time. Don't know who he is. This man and this very attractive, much younger woman sit down, they sit on the same side of the booth, they, share off of each other's plates, they're very engaged in one another's company, they've shared out of the same drinking cup, so it's like, it was just giving date night energy. And Marcus asked me if I want to go to an event. He goes, hey, this is going to be this event. It's for the Real Housewives of Atlanta. It's going to be filmed. You've got an RSVP, so send me your email. I send my email, and boom, I get this. I get the response. I'm invited. You've been selected, whatever you want to call it. So at this point, all of the craziness has happened. We have sat down with Angela and Drew, trying to get more clarity. That turned into Angela just stating we have to pretty much say that this was Phaedra.
I'm sorry, Angela. Alex's receipts on TikTok are a lot stronger than yours. If you're going to accuse somebody of setting somebody up, the receipts have got to be receding, and these receipts fell short. They were a flop. So now Andy starts asking Phaedra if she had a problem with Angela, if she wanted to take Angela down. And Phaedra says, no, I don't even know her. I just met her. Why would I want to take her down? Now, Phaedra, it didn't help that you were shading Angela every chance you got, but I am starting to believe that maybe you weren't behind this. Listen, I don't have an issue changing my mind when new information is presented. So Angela accuses Phaedra of doing this to secure her spot. So Phaedra says, girl, stop. I have a guaranteed contract. I said, all right then. I said, Phaedra told us that she will be here for a minute. So now Angela addresses Porsha, and she says, Porsha, what's alarming about you is the fact that you're so eager to believe that she's telling the truth when you've gone through your stuff with her. You made a comment saying that I set this whole thing up. Why would you say that? So Porsha says, listen, everybody thought this whole thing was so silly. You talking about Junior or Debo or Junebug. I said this whole thing is a hot mess. But Porsha goes on to say that none of this sounded real, and now Angela says this is real, and the person is real. So Porsha says that Marcus is lying, and now Angela says, where's the lie? And that's where we end part 1. Again, with all the receipts that are out on TikTok, I'm not so sure that Phaedra did this. Also, Angela, the receipts were a flop. If you are going to accuse somebody of something major like this, those receipts need to be on point. We want text messages. We want DMs. We want it all. A picture of Marcus and his Aunt Kimberly with Phaedra's older brother. What does that prove? I'm sorry, but I expected more from Angela. The receipts did not do it for me whatsoever. I thought it was embarrassing. But guys, this first part was just okay. Hopefully parts 2 and 3 are better. We shall see. But that was my recap. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening on the podcast. And you already know what to do. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you all later. Bye.